I was sent this really cool puzzle from Craft Hub. Now, this is not an ad. Nobody has paid me to do this video, but they did send me a cool puzzle, so I thought we could make it together and talk about Tolkien. The puzzle I have here is the map of Middle-earth. It's a wooden jigsaw puzzle, but they also do loads of really, really cool stuff. Even things like painting by numbers and DIY lamps. Who knew those existed? So if you are stuck on what to get someone in your life that's super nerdy for Christmas, or like me, you just need an excuse to avoid forced interactions with your family, because I'm too busy doing a puzzle, mum, okay, to argue about Brexit, then I would absolutely check this site out. So I was kind of in two minds for this video. Like, one was to kind of have a chat about Middle-earth in general and how Tolkien created Middle-earth, what parts of it we don't get to see in the movies, yada, yada, yada. Or we chat about the future of Lord of the Rings and why I'm kind of nervous, and in particular, why I don't think, I've said it now, that the Lord of the Rings game is a good idea. I figured we'd go with this one. It's a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more chatty, kind of different, but it goes with the puzzle, like, chilled vibe. Anyway, let's talk about Lord of the Rings. So, I'm 32. And like most of us here, probably I think we're all around the same age. My nostalgic humour, it does tend to land. Nobody complains about my jokes or says they don't understand them. So that keeps me optimistic that I'm kind of hanging out with people around my age. I digress. I was first introduced to The Hobbit when I was 10. I watched all of the Lord of the Rings movies when they were released at the cinema, and I never looked back. Tolkien's writing, Peter Jackson's movies, they have been in my life for 22 years. So you know that feeling, it's kind of like when life's a little bit too much and you crack open the Lord of the Rings and suddenly you're somewhere that just makes sense to you. That's me. Every reread, every rewatch, I'm just back there. Middle-earth is my escape hatch. The rent's cheaper, the friendships are way deeper, and the people actually mean it when they say that they'll stand by you. Every time I pick up the books, I find something new. A line I never noticed, a bit of history tucked into the footnotes, or some emotional gut punch from Samwise that just hits way harder than it did last time. It's the perfect balance of like high adventure, deep relationships, and just enough magic to believe it could all be really real if you squint. But what really gets me is the friendship, the warmth, the Merry, the Pippin, and Sam. When they all reveal their conspiracy to Frodo, I melt every time. That scene, it has more heart than most modern friendships combined. No fake likes, no ghosting, just honest to every loyalty. And it makes you kind of want to text your mates and tell them, like, I would totally help you sneak out of the Shire too. The funny thing is, I still get that really bittersweet dread as I near the end. Like, you know it's coming, that moment when you've got to close the book and you're like, oh, got to go back to reality now. There's no Ents, there's no 11s. What am I supposed to do? It does take me like the solid few days to recover every time. When I first read it, I kept waiting for someone to betray the Fellowship. I was kind of like, okay, Aragorn's way too perfect. Sam's too good to be true. One of them's got to pull a red wedding at some point, right? But no treachery, just genuine decency. Tolkien basically said, what if people didn't suck? And he built an entire, mythology around this, and it blew my mind. And speaking of mythologies, holy fucking Valinor, right? It's massive. And so what started off as The Hobbit, like a bedtime story, became this full-on lifetime quest. I went from Lord of the Rings to the appendices. I fell into the Silmarillion multiple times because it's really difficult to read. And every time I reached the end, I discovered another pile of notes, or poems, or letters, or obscure elvish family trees. It's like Tolkien left a secret, extended universe long before Disney tried to make it cool. For me, I think it's just, it's the joy, the exploration. It's like Skyrim, but written by a language professor who moonlighted like a wizard. And like I said, if going back to that mythology, it's chef's kiss. It's this beautiful blend of epic heroism, tragic love stories, deep-rooted symbolism. Beren and Luthien, Aragorn and Arwen, literal millennia of poetic parallels. You've got temptation, redemption, fading magic, and then these little folk who just save the world while everyone else is arguing about politics. It's got everything. The man didn't just write stories, he literally handcrafted a religion out of hope and courage. And then there are the characters, right? They're like old friends. Frodo and Sam, the original support duo. Aragorn, the rugged king who still manages to be humble and kind and incredibly bloody hot. Faramir, patron saint of like gentle men who read, and Gandalf, the cosmic granddad who just shows up with fireworks and wisdom, and even the villains are fascinating. Gollum's like this one toxic friend you can't help but pity. Denethor's like the overworked manager of Gondor Incorporated, and Saruman just total like fallen, irritating LinkedIn influencer. Anyway, the places. Rivendell feels like a spa retreat for the soul. Lothlorien is so aesthetically pleasing. The Shire is like the ultimate whimsical paradise. And the films, I think they nailed the visuals. Sure, Tolkien's words, they make you feel like you could walk there, smell the grass, hear the elves singing, maybe steal some of Farmer Maggot's mushrooms if you're feeling bold. And then there are the moments that just kind of live in your head rent-free. They never end. Gandalf and his "you shall not pass," like mic drop fantasy moment in history. Yeah, Frodo at Mount Doom, Sam carrying him because, you know, friendship beats lava. Like, you don't get tired of them. I don't think anyone does. And I think the words, the language, Tolkien's writing, it feels like reading something carved into an ancient tree trunk. All the ears and the orts and the noughts, and they sound right. And the Elvish, like I remember the first time I understood a line of Sindarin, like without translating, and I swear I nearly cried. I might have cried. Maybe I cried. Don't tell anyone I cried. It's like my brain unlocked like a side quest in the language of angels. And at the end of the day, that's what I love about Tolkien. I don't think he gave us, he didn't just give us an escape. He gave us like a map back to the good stuff in our own world, friendship, courage, kindness, and a reminder. Even the smallest person can change the course of the future. So for me, it's all of it. It's the escape, the exploration, the mythology, the old friends, the memorable moments, the words that sing. Tolkien's world isn't just something I read. It literally is something I live in a little bit every time I read it. And now I'm kind of afraid of what's to come. And here's why. For a while, Lord of the Rings was left alone. Okay, no more movies. I mean, we'll touch on games in a minute. But in terms of TV, not really much going on because nothing needed to be done. And then along came Rings of Power and the Dolly Parton orcs working 9 to 5 to pay the family's bills. Stumble out of bed and I tumbled it. If I start with season 1, with what it did well, okay. Look, I liked seeing the Two Trees of Valinor, okay? I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime. It's a fantasy equivalent of seeing something like the Beatles reunite and then do a live album, right? Numenor 2, it's a proper goosebumps, the kind of stuff that makes you weepy, but in the best, most embarrassing way. And I was skeptical about characters like Adar and Elrondr, but I think Adar in particular, I did really like him. Usually new fantasy characters land kind of like Jar Jar Binks, a Hobbit feast. But these two, they did kind of work. I think that's pretty much all I have to say for season 1 in terms of positives. Complaining about the Rings of Power probably would need its own video, but I would likely start with the Mithril origin story. I'd then probably follow up with like Finrod telling Galadriel that sometimes, what is it he says, to find the light we must first touch the darkness or something. Like, okay, hun, that's everything that Tolkien stood for, right? And was Halbrand necessary? Did he need to be a love interest? The list goes ever on. Season 2 pipes up, and I wasn't going to watch it until I saw a lot more positive comments than I did from season 1. So for me, Sauron carried this season. I'm still beating that Adar drum because honestly, they're probably the best characters in this show. Sauron and Adar, I think they absolutely steal the spotlight for me. Both are menacing, they're layered. They're the kind of the right amount of like, I can fix him. Probably shouldn't, but I really want to. The writers, I think they've managed that rare trick of kind of like giving them proper depth without accidentally turning them into like misunderstood anti-heroes who just need a hug and a therapy session. Like Sauron especially, I mean, the bloke we know is Morgoth's right-hand man, basically Middle-earth's middle manager of evil. And yet here he is like strutting around like he could make Thanos cry. He's chilling, he's charismatic, and you know he's the type to like send a follow-up email about your doom. That's the vibe I'm getting. Adar, meanwhile, it's the kind of villain you almost find yourself agreeing with, which is always alarming. Together, they kind of give the whole show a really, really good edge. Not just like moustache twirling bad guys, but complex, tragic, and kind of fascinating in that I'm slightly worried how much I like them now, sort of way. So I really hats off to them. Hats off to the actors, really, for pulling that off. I always love a dwarf. I can't argue because I love dwarfs. Dorian and Deezer, they continue to be the heart, don't they, and soul, I suppose, of the whole operation. Proper like scene stealers, those two. Every time they're on screen, it's kind of like being invited to like a really cozy dinner party in Khazad-dûm. You know they'd insist you stay for another round and then accidentally mine you a family heirloom before dessert. Dorian's growing rift with his dad is kind of gripping too. It's Shakespeare, but with way more beards and slightly better lighting. The whole Gandalf thing, meh. I've had better naps. I do want to mention that visually, though, I do think this season kind of leveled up like properly compared to season 1. I think the first one, it did have really nice landscapes, I'll give them that, but they sometimes looked a little bit too like desktop wallpaper on your PC. Like the characters were walking through a very expensive screensaver at times. It is a subtle difference, but a really important one when it comes to world building. The forests, the grasslands, the cities, they're not just sitting there looking pretty this time. They're kind of swallowing the characters up in the best way. It does feel like these people exist in Middle Earth again, rather than just visiting it for like a photo op. And that's kind of huge because fantasy only really works when you believe the world's real enough that you got lost trying to find the nearest pub. Heroes of the story, though, I don't think they nailed them at all. They don't have that Tolkien nobility, that mix of like goodness, guilt and occasional emotional breakdown that make Frodo and Sam feel so real. Instead, everyone's just a bit too morally grey and boring. Like they've all been watching Game of Thrones and taking notes from season 8. It makes me wonder if anyone actually needs magic rings to fall from grace when they're already halfway bloody there. And then there's the whole religion thing. Like the show still can't decide whether Middle Earth runs on divine providence, elven HR policy, or vague cosmic god vibes. 1 minute everyone's like name dropping the Valar like they're all mates from uni, and the next they're all like something greater guides us, like it's the Force. Tolkien's world had theology baked in. This one is just microwaving it. Like, make your mind up, okay? We then have War of the Rohirrim. So this one promised to tell the tale of Helm Hammerhand. Yes, that Helm of Helm's Deep. Like the big lad who punched his enemies to death and then made winter awkward for everyone. And it sounds brilliant. Sadly, what we got was like this less epic saga of Rohan and more family drama with extra horses. Credit where it's due. The story mostly sticks to Tolkien's notes, which, to be fair, was like a page and a half long. And the filmmakers then clearly saw the gaps and thought, cool, not that much to it, so let's fill those gaps with everything we've ever seen in Middle Earth. Cue the eagles, and the Watcher in the Water, and Mumakil, and Saruman, and the mandatory ring references, like basically the cinematic equivalent of sprinkling every spice in the cupboard into one stew, and wondering why your mouth is on fire. They even claimed at the premiere that it could stand on its own. Bless them. Warner Brothers clearly didn't get that memo, and then they plastered the marketing with imagery of the two towers, hoping that nostalgia alone would drag us back to the cinema. I just don't even understand. I think if you love Howard Shore, if you love his music, and if you love Jackson's like sweeping New Zealand vistas, then you do kind of get a warm fuzzy feeling, maybe a faint, very faint sense that you've heard this tune before. It's probably because you have. The film's score and design, they lean so heavily on Jackson's trilogy that it is practically holding its hand. It feels a little bit like a high-budget fan film made by someone who just really, really misses 2003. And the runtime, sorry for swearing, but Christ, over 2 hours for what's essentially a medieval tiff. It moves slower than an ant on sleeping pills. Look, it's not terrible. It's just aggressively fine. Like someone decided, okay, was a creative direction. Look, in the end, War of the Rohirrim isn't a disaster. It's just kind of forgettable. The story is really thin. The character's flatter than the Hobbit's ale after second breakfast. And the animation it's kind of a bit janky. It'll please Die Hard fans and probably no one else. I've probably really offended whole demographic there. But Tolkien's world, it deserves more than just it was fine. He gave us myth and majesty. This one gives us content still. At least it's not another prequel about Gollum's gap year. Small mercies, eh? Oh, speaking of which, The Hunt for Gollum. And then obviously we've also got season 3 of The Rings of Power. They are both on the way. If we start with The Hunt for Gollum, Andy Serkis, he gave us an unforgettable performance. It was so good. It made us forget we were watching what is essentially a damp, hairless ferret having a breakdown. But here's the thing. I think he worked because he wasn't the main event. He was the weird, tragic seasoning in the stew that I talked about earlier, not the whole meal. So naturally, someone thought, I think I know what people want. 3 solid hours of him muttering to himself and crawling around like a wet cat. Because apparently we've learned nothing from that Gollum game in, when was it? A couple of years ago, 2023? It was a cinematic disaster that disguised itself as like an interactive entertainment. That fiasco, I think it already proved the obvious that a cowardly, self-loathing swamp creature isn't exactly blockbuster protagonist material. Gollum, he does have a great origin story. I've got a series all about it. If it is of interest to you, then please go and check that out. But I'm kind of hoping they delve into that somewhat rather than focusing on him just scrambling around Middle-earth, evading everyone until he's essentially discovered by Aragorn by accident. Can we trust Warner Brothers is a huge question, and the short answer is, well, probably not. Back in the day, we've got New Line Cinema, right? I genuinely think they cared about The Lord of the Rings. They handed Peter Jackson like a massive budget, some creative freedom, probably a really stiff drink, and then they let him go full Middle-earth madman. And the result was cinematic history. But with New Line gone, and now absorbed by Warner Brothers, the same studio currently speed running its own villain arc. Like, what are we doing? Like, these days, Warner Brothers is less like champion of cinema and more like dragons sitting on a pile of tax write-offs. They've shelved entire finished films just to save a few quid. They say they're behind it now, but studio loyalty lasts about as long as The Hobbit's diet plan. One boardroom reshuffle later and we could easily see the budget halved and then release date quietly like reevaluated. And this is kind of where my big fear really kicks in, is that we don't need more prequels. Like, please put the ring down and step away from the timeline. Honestly, do we have to keep doing this? I think first it was Star Wars, then it was Star Trek, and now Middle-earth's caught in the same like prequel plague, if you want to call it that. Every studio exec seems to think the same way, like to honor a masterpiece is to explain its death. The Rings of Power at least had its moments. Massive budgets, kind of shiny-ish swords, and a few moving moments, I suppose, but even that gets bogged down by the like, we already know how this ends problem. And now they're floating a Gollum movie, and I just think 3 hours of him muttering to himself and eating raw fish, like, we already know what he was up to, crawling about in caves and occasionally hissing at the moon. We don't need to see every damp mile of it. It's not storytelling, it feels like surveillance. At least The Hobbit, it kind of made sense as a well, it did make sense as a prequel. It set up the ring, Bilbo's backstory, the whole 9 yards. The Rings of Power too, fine. It got the War of the Ring kind of build up, some lore to chew on, but the search for Gollum, the hunt for Gollum, it kind of screams cash grab. Cash grab. Kind of like Warner Brothers looked at Disney and was like, yeah, hold my mead. It's the cinematic equivalent of DLC that just nobody wants. We've seen it happen before. Like I said, Star Wars spin-offs about background extras, MCU shows about characters you forgot existed. Nostalgia keeps the lights on, sure. But it's not like a substitute for a story. Sometimes the bravest thing a studio can do is, well, nothing. The next thing that I wanted to kind of touch on is that we know the UK is getting its own Universal Studios, all with the predictable, very British inspirations. We've heard Paddington mention James Bond, Harry Potter, and then they mentioned Lord of the Rings. Which is exciting, okay? It's exciting as hell. Don't get me wrong, I feel like I'm really complaining in this video. It is very exciting, but it is also very scary because what came next was also an announcement of like a Lord of the Rings game. That's in development. And it's described as like a third-person action game, which again can be fantastic if done correctly. But the way things are going, please don't let these things be another cash grab, one after the other. Please do not get me wrong. There have been some absolutely brilliant Lord of the Rings video games. Only recently I uploaded a video about how Shadow of War, it still slaps now. And if I could play Battle for Middle-earth 2 for the first time again, I absolutely would. But even the most recent game, Tales of the Shire, was bloody awful. It's almost on par with Gollum again, and that's new media. Tales of the Shire, War of the Rohirrim, Rings of Power, all new, all questionable. None of them compare. You see, I would really like to know where you stand with this one. Please let me know in the comments. Don't get me wrong, I love this world. Tolkien gave us something timeless, stories that feel ancient and alive all at once. But lately, it does feel like the studios have kind of mistaken timeless for like infinite franchise potential. Every new project that gets announced, you've kind of got that same nervous hope. Maybe this one will capture the magic again, maybe. But more often than not, it feels like someone's pressed new game on nostalgia and forgotten about the story. It's not that I don't want more Tolkien. I just want better Tolkien. Give me heart, give me craft, give me something that feels like it was made by people who actually read the books and not just the box office numbers. If we get another Shadow of War or something bold and brilliant, finally, I'll be first in line, controller in hand, optimism in the other. But if it's just another wave of reheated prequels and corporate content, then maybe we should all take a page out of Bilbo's book and retire to the Shire, put on the kettle and enjoy what we already have. Because I think at the end of the day, Tolkien, he didn't write stories to sell action figures or games or any of that, really. He wrote them to remind us that hope and courage and friendship, they all still matter when the world feels a little bit too much like Mordor. Anyway, I'm only going to implore you one time to please do all these things you need to do to support my channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.